It was a quiet Sunday morning over Athens. The sun rose gently across the city, and the world awakened in calm routines. But in the sky above, something was deeply wrong. A commercial jet, a Boeing 737, was circling endlessly in the blue, its path fixed and lifeless. No communication, no descent, just a silent ghost hanging in the air. To the people below, it was an eerie and inexplicable sight. Why hadn't it landed? Why did it keep turning? This was Helios Airways Flight 522 on August 14, 2005. It took off from Larnaca, Cyprus, bound for Athens with 115 passengers and 6 crew on board. It was supposed to be a routine 90-minute hop. Most passengers were families heading on vacation. The cockpit was manned by Captain Hans-Jürgen Merton and First Officer Pampos Charalambous. Among the cabin crew were flight attendants Andreas Prodromou and his fiancée, Haris Charalambous. The weather was perfect, the takeoff was smooth. Nothing seemed unusual until it was far too late. Minutes after liftoff, something started to go wrong. A configuration warning horn sounded in the cockpit, loud, persistent, and seemingly out of place. The captain called maintenance to report the alarm, but neither he nor the ground team could find the source. What they didn't know was that a critical switch, the cabin pressurization control, had been left in manual mode after a prior maintenance check. As the aircraft climbed, the pressure inside the cabin remained dangerously low. At 18,000 feet, the oxygen in the air thinned. At 20,000 feet, the symptoms of hypoxia began to set in. In the passenger cabin, masks suddenly dropped from the ceiling. Confused travelers grabbed for them, not understanding why. But it wasn't enough. Within minutes, the low oxygen levels overcame everyone. Headaches, confusion, sleep, then unconsciousness. In the cockpit, the pilots were faring no better. They believed the alarm was a false signal. They didn't recognize the signs of hypoxia until it was too late. First, the first officer passed out. Then the captain slumped in his seat. Flight 522 was now airborne without a conscious crew. The plane continued, guided only by autopilot, holding its altitude at 34,000 feet. Athens air traffic controllers noticed something odd. Flight 522 wasn't descending. It wasn't responding to calls. Panic grew. 2 F-16 fighter jets were scrambled to intercept the silent aircraft. As they pulled alongside the jet, they saw a scene straight from a nightmare. The co-pilot was slumped over the controls. The captain's seat was empty. Behind them, through the cabin windows, passengers sat motionless, oxygen masks still dangling from their faces. But then, movement. Someone was in the cockpit. Andreas Prodromou, a 25-year-old flight attendant with a private pilot's license, had managed to stay conscious longer than the rest, possibly thanks to portable oxygen. He had entered the cockpit, sat in the captain's chair, and took control. With shaking hands and blurred vision, he tried to save the flight. He shouted, "Mayday, Mayday," but the radio frequency was still set to Larnaca. No one heard him. Still, he disengaged autopilot. He turned the plane slightly, guiding it away from densely populated areas. It was a desperate final act, but time was slipping away. Flight 522 had been in the air for nearly 3 hours. Fuel was running low. The F-16 pilots could only watch as the engines flamed out, one after the other. The silent jet began a slow, inevitable descent. At 9:03 a.m., it crashed into the hills near Grammatiko, just north of Athens. A fireball erupted on impact. All 121 people aboard were killed instantly. In the days that followed, investigators uncovered a grim and simple truth. The maintenance team had left the pressurization system on manual during a routine check. The pilots, during their pre-flight inspection, failed to notice. Once airborne, they misunderstood the warnings, believing the takeoff alarm had malfunctioned. The cabin slowly lost oxygen. Hypoxia crept in, dulling their senses until they were no longer capable of recognizing what was happening or correcting it. What made this even more tragic was that the warning systems in the Boeing 737 were dangerously ambiguous. The same horn used to indicate takeoff configuration errors was also used to signal cabin pressure issues. The flight crew, already groggy and disoriented, were never able to realize the danger. No one aboard knew they were suffocating until it was too late. The official report concluded that everyone on board had been alive at the moment of impact. They had passed out, not died in flight. It was a terrifying thought that they remained unconscious, unable to wake up or scream, as the plane descended toward its fiery end. In the aftermath, changes were made to flight safety protocols and maintenance procedures. But none of it could undo the loss. Families across Greece and Cyprus were shattered. Memorials were built, names were read aloud, and the haunting image of that aircraft circling above Athens burned itself into history. But among all the grief, one name stands apart: Andreas Prodromou, the young flight attendant who rose, alone, in the final moments of the doomed flight, who tried desperately to save the lives of 120 strangers. He is remembered not just as a victim, but as a hero. His voice was never heard on the ground, but the bravery in that cockpit spoke volumes. This is the story of Helios Airways Flight 522, a ghost plane, a forgotten switch, and a tragedy that should never have happened. A reminder, forever etched in the skies above Athens, of how small mistakes can lead to unthinkable consequences.